Sarah Johnson pulled her car into the parking lot of Atlanta Memorial Hospital, just like she had done every morning for the past 3 years. The early morning sun was barely peeking through the clouds as she adjusted her nurse's badge and grabbed her coffee from the cup holder. At 32 years old, she had established herself as one of the most respected nurses in the rehabilitation ward. "Morning, Sarah," called out Jenny, the receptionist, as Sarah walked through the sliding doors. "We got a new patient transfer coming in today from room 302. Dr. Matthews wants you to handle this case personally." Sarah nodded, her tight curls bouncing slightly as she made her way to the nurse's station. She hadn't expected anything different about this Tuesday morning, but life had other plans for her. At exactly 9:15 a.m., two orderlies wheeled in the new patient. Sarah looked up from her paperwork and felt her heart skip a beat. The man in the wheelchair had the most striking smile she had ever seen, even though he looked tired from the transfer. Marcus Thompson, she read from his chart. 35 years old, partial paralysis from T12 vertebrae injury due to car accident 3 years ago. "Nice to meet you," Marcus said, his voice warm and friendly. "I hope you don't mind having another stubborn patient who's determined to walk again." Sarah couldn't help but smile. Unlike some patients who carried their trauma like a heavy cloud, Marcus had an infectious optimism that lit up the room. His dark brown eyes sparkled with intelligence and humor, despite his condition. As Sarah began her initial assessment, she learned that Marcus had been a successful software engineer before the accident. He still worked remotely for his company, refusing to let his disability stop him from pursuing his career. "The doctors at the other hospital said this facility has better rehabilitation equipment," Marcus explained as Sarah checked his vitals. "Plus, I heard you have the best staff in Atlanta." "We do our best," Sarah replied professionally, though she couldn't help noticing how his smile made her feel oddly flustered. She had worked with hundreds of patients before, but something about Marcus was different. Throughout the morning, Sarah helped Marcus settle into his new room. She noticed how he made jokes about his condition, not in a self-deprecating way, but with genuine humor that made even the other patients laugh. "You know what the hardest part about being in a wheelchair is?" he asked while Sarah helped him with his physical therapy exercises. "Everyone always looks down on you, literally." The other nurses noticed how Sarah spent extra time in Marcus's room, making sure he was comfortable and had everything he needed. They weren't used to seeing their usually serious colleague laugh so much during her rounds. "Girl, I haven't seen you smile this much since they installed that new coffee machine in the break room," her friend Lisa teased during lunch break. "I'm just doing my job," Sarah defended herself, but she knew it wasn't entirely true. There was something about Marcus that made her want to know more about him, beyond what was written in his medical chart. That afternoon, while helping Marcus with his arm exercises, she learned about his family, how his parents had passed away years ago, and his sister lived in California with her own family. He was essentially alone in Atlanta, focusing all his energy on his recovery. "It must be lonely," Sarah said before she could stop herself, immediately regretting the unprofessional comment. "Sometimes," Marcus admitted, looking at her with those expressive eyes. "But you know what? Life has a funny way of bringing good people into your life when you least expect it." As Sarah finished her shift that evening, she couldn't stop thinking about Marcus. She had always prided herself on maintaining professional boundaries with her patients, but something told her that Marcus Thompson was going to challenge every rule she had set for herself. Walking to her car, Sarah remembered how her mother had always told her that God worked in mysterious ways. Looking back at the hospital building, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, this unexpected meeting was more than just another patient assignment. Little did Sarah know that this ordinary Tuesday would mark the beginning of an extraordinary journey that would change not only her life, but also her understanding of what true love really means. Would you like me to write part 2 next? Over the next few weeks, Sarah found herself looking forward to her shifts more than ever before. Her coworkers noticed how she always volunteered to handle Marcus's therapy sessions, but she brushed off their knowing smiles with professional excuses. One morning, while helping Marcus with his daily exercises, she discovered his brilliant mind. He was telling her about a software program he had designed to help other disabled people work from home more effectively. "You should see their faces when they realize I created the program from my wheelchair," Marcus said, grinning as he completed his arm rotations. "People tend to underestimate what we can do." Sarah watched him, impressed not just by his physical determination but by his sharp intelligence. Has anyone ever told you that you're pretty amazing? She asked before catching herself. Marcus's eyes twinkled. Well, not my nurse until now, he teased, making Sarah blush deeply. During their therapy sessions, Sarah learned more about Marcus's life before the accident. He had traveled the world, giving lectures about computer programming and helping startups develop their systems. The accident happened when a drunk driver hit his car on a rainy night, but Marcus never spoke about it with bitterness. Life's too short to be angry, he explained while practicing his wheelchair maneuvers. Besides, if the accident hadn't happened, I wouldn't have met you. Sarah felt her heart flutter at his words, but she tried to maintain her professional demeanor. Mr. Thompson, are you flirting with your nurse? She asked, trying to sound stern but failing miserably. That depends, he replied with a mischievous smile. Is it working? The other patients in the rehabilitation ward noticed their special connection too. Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly patient recovering from hip surgery, often commented on how Marcus's face lit up whenever Sarah entered the room. My hija, Mrs. Rodriguez said to Sarah one day, love doesn't care if someone walks or rolls. It only cares about what's in the heart. Sarah's colleague Lisa cornered her in the break room after witnessing another one of their friendly interactions. Girl, I see what's happening here, Lisa said, stirring her coffee. But be careful. You know the rules about dating patients. It's not like that, Sarah protested weakly, but she knew she was lying to herself. Every time Marcus smiled at her, every time their hands touched during therapy, she felt something she had never experienced before. One afternoon, while helping Marcus practice his upper body exercises, he suddenly asked, Sarah, what's your favorite food? Thai, she answered, surprised by the random question. Why? Because I'm being discharged next week, he said, his eyes serious now. And I'd like to take you to dinner to thank you for everything. There's this great Thai place downtown that's wheelchair accessible. Sarah froze, her professional training battling with her heart. Marcus, I don't think that would be appropriate. I'm your nurse. Not after next week, he pointed out. Then I'll just be a guy asking a beautiful woman to have dinner with him. Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Matthews walked in for his rounds. But Marcus's words stayed with her all day. That evening, as she drove home, she thought about all the reasons why dating a former patient would be complicated. Her family might not understand, society might judge them, and her colleagues might gossip. But then she remembered how Marcus made her laugh, how his determination inspired her, and how he saw the world with such optimism despite his challenges. She thought about Mrs. Rodriguez's words about love not caring about physical limitations. The next morning, when she arrived for her shift, she found a note on her desk. It was from Marcus, written in neat handwriting. Life is full of challenges. Some people can't walk, some people fear what others might think, and some people let good things pass them by because they're scared. I'm not afraid of challenges anymore. Are you? Marcus. Sarah held the note close to her heart, knowing that her answer would change both their lives forever. As she walked to Marcus's room for his morning therapy, she had already decided what she would say about that dinner invitation. Sometimes, she realized, the biggest risk in life is not taking one at all. Would you like me to continue with part 3? That first dinner date changed everything. Sarah sat across from Marcus at the Thai restaurant, nervously smoothing her blue dress as he ordered for both of them in perfect Thai, surprising her yet again. 7 years working in Bangkok, he explained with a grin. Before all this happened, he gestured to his wheelchair without a hint of self-pity. As they shared spicy noodles and curry, Sarah felt herself relaxing. Outside the hospital walls, Marcus was even more charming. He told her stories about his travels, his eyes lighting up as he described coding marathons in Tokyo and sunrise meetings in Dubai. But you know what? He said, looking at her intently. I never felt more alive than when I'm with you. Sarah blushed, but before she could respond, she noticed people at nearby tables staring at them. Some were smiling sympathetically, others whispering behind their hands. Her heart sank as she realized this would be their reality, constant stares and whispers. Marcus noticed her discomfort and reached across the table for her hand. Hey, he said softly, let them look. All I see is you. The next few weeks were like a beautiful dream. They went to movies, visited parks, and spent hours just talking. Marcus showed her how to see the world differently, from his perspective, both literally and figuratively. But reality had its own plans. One Sunday, Sarah took Marcus to meet her family for dinner. Her mother, Mrs. Johnson, dropped a casserole dish when they entered, clearly shocked despite knowing about Marcus's condition beforehand. "Sarah, baby," her mother pulled her into the kitchen later. "I know you have a big heart. Have you really thought this through? Taking care of a disabled man for the rest of your life?" "Mama, I'm not taking care of him," Sarah replied firmly. "I'm falling in love with him." Her younger brother James was more direct. "Sis, people are going to talk. They already are. My friends asked if you couldn't find an able-bodied man to date." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. "Your friends? What about my happiness? What about the fact that Marcus makes me laugh more than anyone ever has? What about love?" Back in the dining room, Marcus was charming Sarah's father with his knowledge of sports and technology. Mr. Johnson, a retired computer teacher, was fascinated by Marcus's work in software development. "You know," Marcus said to Mr. Johnson, "your daughter's strength isn't just physical, helping patients like me. It's in her heart. She sees people for who they are, not what they can or can't do." Later that night, as Sarah drove them home, Marcus was unusually quiet. "I'm sorry about my family," she said softly. "Don't be," he replied. "They're worried about you. I understand. Sometimes," he paused, "sometimes I wonder if they're right." Sarah pulled the car over abruptly. "Marcus Thompson, look at me," she demanded. "Do you know what I see when I look at you? I see a brilliant man who makes me happy. I see someone who showed me that love doesn't need legs to stand tall." Tears formed in Marcus's eyes. "Sarah, this won't be easy. There will always be people who don't understand." "Then they don't need to understand," she said firmly. "All they need to do is respect my choice, and my choice is you." Marcus reached for her hand, and in that moment, sitting in her car under the streetlights, they both knew they were past the point of turning back. This wasn't just dating anymore. This was something deeper, something that would require courage to pursue. That night, after dropping Marcus off at his apartment, Sarah sat in her car for a long time, thinking about her mother's words, her brother's concerns, and the stares they got in public. Then she thought about Marcus's smile, his brilliant mind, and the way he made her feel like the most special person in the world. She pulled out her phone and texted him. "Some people spend their whole lives walking, but never really going anywhere. With you, even sitting still, I'm on the greatest journey of my life." His reply came quickly. "Then let's keep walking this path together, no matter what anyone says." Sarah smiled, knowing that what they had was worth fighting for, worth every stare, every whisper, and every challenge that lay ahead. Would you like me to continue with part 4? 6 months into their relationship, Marcus and Sarah had fallen into a comfortable routine. Every Friday night, they would meet at their favorite park, where Marcus would cook dinner using a portable grill attached to his wheelchair, something he had engineered himself. On this particular Friday, Sarah noticed Marcus seemed nervous, constantly checking his phone and adjusting his collar. The autumn air was crisp, and fallen leaves surrounded their usual picnic spot under the old oak tree. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked, watching him fumble with the containers of food. "You've been acting strange all evening." "Everything's perfect," Marcus replied, though his voice cracked slightly. "Just perfect." As they finished their meal, Marcus asked Sarah to grab a blanket from his backpack. When she reached inside, her fingers touched a small velvet box. Her heart stopped. "I had this whole speech planned," Marcus said softly, watching her face as she pulled out the box. "About how you changed my life, how you saw past this wheelchair, how you fought for us when everyone else doubted." Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the box, revealing a beautiful diamond ring with small sapphires on either side. "But now, sitting here with you," Marcus continued, his eyes glistening with tears, "all I can think to say is that I love you, Sarah Johnson. Will you marry me?" Before Sarah could answer, they heard clapping. She turned to see her family emerging from behind the trees, her parents, James, and even her conservative Aunt Martha. Behind them came Marcus's sister Katie, who had flown in from California. "I asked your father's permission last week," Marcus explained. "I wanted them all to be here because they need to see what I see, a love that's stronger than any obstacle. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she looked at her family. Her mother was crying too, but this time they were tears of joy. Even James was smiling, holding up his phone to record the moment. Yes, Sarah whispered, then louder, yes, 1,000 times yes. As she leaned down to kiss Marcus, her father stepped forward. I was wrong, he admitted. When Sarah first told us about you, Marcus, I worried about her future. But watching you two these past months, I've learned that love isn't about what a person can or can't do physically. It's about how they make your child's eyes light up. Katie, Marcus's sister, hugged Sarah tightly. I haven't seen my brother this happy since before the accident, she whispered. You gave him back his joy. The families gathered around them, congratulating and taking pictures. Sarah's mother pulled Marcus aside, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry for doubting you, she said. Welcome to the family, son. Later that evening, as their families celebrated at a nearby restaurant, Marcus and Sarah snuck a quiet moment alone on the restaurant's terrace. Are you sure about this? Marcus asked, holding her hand. Marriage to me won't be like other marriages. There will be challenges. Sarah touched his face gently. Every marriage has challenges. Ours might be different, but our love is stronger. Besides, she smiled mischievously, who else would build me a wheelchair-mounted BBQ grill? Marcus laughed, then grew serious. There's something else I need to tell you, he said mysteriously. Something I've been working on in secret. But it has to wait until our wedding day. Another surprise? Sarah raised an eyebrow. You know I'm not good with surprises. Trust me, Marcus replied, his eyes twinkling. This one will be worth the wait. Inside, they could hear their families laughing together, already planning the wedding. Sarah looked at her engagement ring, then at Marcus, knowing that this was just the beginning of their journey. I love you, she said simply, wheelchair and all. I love you too, Marcus replied, stubbornness and all. As they rejoined their families, Sarah couldn't help but think about how far they'd come, from patient and nurse, to friends, to soulmates. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever surprises Marcus had planned, she knew they would face them together. Little did she know that Marcus's wedding day surprise would change their lives in ways she could never imagine. Would you like me to continue with part 5? The months leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah noticed that Marcus seemed especially busy, often disappearing for hours during the day, claiming he had wedding preparations to handle. When she asked about these mysterious preparations, he would just smile and say, You'll see. One afternoon, while trying on her wedding dress at the boutique, Sarah overheard two saleswomen whispering. Such a shame, one said. Pretty girl like that marrying a man in a wheelchair. She'll be more of a caretaker than a wife. Sarah's mother, who also heard them, stood up angrily. My daughter, she announced loudly, is marrying a brilliant software engineer who makes 6 figures and treats her like a queen. The only shame here is your ignorance. Sarah hugged her mother, tears in her eyes. Thank you, Mama. You've come so far from that first dinner. Love opened my eyes, her mother replied simply. Just like it opened yours. Meanwhile, Marcus was keeping a strict schedule that no one quite understood. 3 times a week, he would visit a private medical facility across town. When Sarah asked about these visits, he insisted they were just routine checkups. You're not sick, are you? She asked worriedly one evening. Never been better, he assured her, but there was something mysterious in his smile. The wedding venue had to be carefully chosen to accommodate Marcus's wheelchair. They finally found a beautiful garden with paved pathways and a stunning gazebo. The wedding planner, Ms. Chen, worked tirelessly to ensure everything would be perfect. We'll need to adjust the altar placement, Ms. Chen said during one planning session, so Mr. Thompson can position his wheelchair properly for the ceremony. Actually, Marcus interrupted, I have different plans for the ceremony, but I can't discuss them yet. Sarah and Ms. Chen exchanged confused looks, but Marcus wouldn't elaborate. One day, while dropping off lunch at Marcus's office, Sarah ran into his physical therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, leaving the building. Your fiancé is the most determined patient I've ever had, Dr. Rodriguez said, then quickly added, I mean, for his regular therapy. Before Sarah could ask questions, Marcus appeared, smoothly changing the subject to their upcoming honeymoon plans. 2 weeks before the wedding, during their dance lesson, The instructor seemed to know something Sarah didn't. She kept giving Marcus secretive nods and saying things like, "Everything is going according to plan." "What plan?" Sarah asked. "Just making sure we have all the wheelchair dance moves perfect," Marcus replied quickly, but Sarah noticed he wouldn't meet her eyes. Even Katie, Marcus's sister, seemed to be in on whatever was happening. Sarah caught her sneaking what looked like medical documents into her purse during the wedding rehearsal. "Is there something you're not telling me?" Sarah confronted Marcus that evening. "Just trust me," he said, kissing her hand. "Everything I'm doing is for us, for our perfect day." The night before the wedding, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat on her balcony, looking at the stars, thinking about her journey with Marcus. From that first day in the hospital to tomorrow, when she would become Mrs. Thompson. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Tomorrow will change everything. I can't wait to show you what love can do." Sarah smiled at the cryptic message. Then another text came through. "By the way, don't be alarmed if you see some unusual equipment near the altar tomorrow. It's all part of the surprise." Now she was really curious, but she knew Marcus wouldn't reveal anything more. Whatever he had planned, she trusted him completely. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Sarah thought about all the people who had doubted their love, who had said it wouldn't work, who had called her foolish. Tomorrow, she would prove that love doesn't need permission or approval. It just needs two hearts beating in harmony. Little did she know that Marcus had spent the last 6 months preparing a moment that would leave everyone speechless, a moment that would prove that miracles do happen, especially when powered by love and determination. Would you like me to continue with part 6? The morning of the wedding dawned bright and beautiful. Sarah sat in the bridal suite, surrounded by bridesmaids and family, her heart beating with excitement. Through the window, she could see guests arriving at the garden venue, and something else that caught her attention: medical personnel setting up some kind of equipment near the altar. "Don't worry about that," Katie said quickly, noticing Sarah's confused expression. "Marcus has everything planned perfectly." Sarah's mother helped her into the wedding dress, a beautiful ivory gown that had been specially designed to look stunning, whether she was standing or kneeling beside Marcus's wheelchair. Her father paced outside the room, occasionally peeking in with tears in his eyes. "My baby girl," he kept saying, all grown up and showing the world what real love looks like. Meanwhile, in the groom's room, Marcus was surrounded by an unusual wedding prep team, not just his groomsmen, but also Dr. Rodriguez and 2 other medical professionals. They were helping him with something underneath his tuxedo, checking straps and adjustments that Sarah couldn't see from her room. The wedding coordinator rushed between rooms, looking increasingly nervous. "Mr. Thompson," she called out, "are you sure about this? We've never done anything like this before." "More sure than I've ever been," Marcus replied, his voice steady and confident. As the ceremony time approached, Sarah's father came to escort her down the aisle. He squeezed her hand and whispered, "You ready for this, baby girl?" "I've been ready since the day I met him," Sarah replied, though she couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was about to happen. The music started, not the traditional wedding march, but their special song, "A Thousand Years." The garden doors opened, and Sarah gasped. The scene before her was magical. Flowers everywhere, guests seated along the paved pathway, and at the altar. Sarah blinked. Where was Marcus's wheelchair? Her heart skipped a beat as she began her walk down the aisle. She could see Marcus at the altar, but something was different. He appeared to be standing behind a decorative podium, supported by something she couldn't quite make out. The guests were whispering, some pointing discreetly, others wiping tears. Sarah's grip on her father's arm tightened as they got closer to the altar. Then she saw it. The medical equipment she'd noticed earlier wasn't just for show. Hidden behind the flower-covered podium were advanced leg braces, carefully concealed but supporting Marcus in a standing position. Dr. Rodriguez and his team stood nearby, watching carefully. Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she realized what this meant, what Marcus had been planning all these months. His mysterious appointments, the secret meetings, Katie's hidden documents, it all made sense now. When she reached the altar, Marcus stood tall, supported by his braces, looking directly into her eyes. No wheelchair between them, no height difference to navigate, just 2 people, standing together, ready to commit their lives to each other. "Surprise?" he whispered, his voice shaking with emotion. "I wanted to stand beside you, just for today, to show everyone that love gives us the strength to do the impossible. The minister stepped forward, but had to pause as the guests wiped away tears and composed themselves. Even Sarah's brother James, who had once been so skeptical, was openly crying. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today to witness not just the union of two people, but the power of love to overcome any obstacle, to rise above any challenge, to quite literally help us stand tall in the face of adversity." Sarah could hardly focus on the words. She couldn't take her eyes off Marcus, standing there, defying every limitation, every doubt, every person who had ever said their love wouldn't work. She understood now why he had kept this secret. This moment was more than just a surprise, it was a testament to their love. The ceremony continued, but this was just the beginning. Marcus had one more surprise planned for their first kiss as husband and wife, a moment that would leave everyone in the garden absolutely speechless. Would you like me to continue with part 7? The minister reached the most anticipated part of the ceremony. "Marcus Thompson, do you take Sarah Johnson to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Marcus, still standing tall in his concealed braces, smiled at Sarah. "I do," he said clearly, his voice carrying across the garden. "I've been practicing those words standing up for 6 months." Several guests chuckled through their tears. Dr. Rodriguez gave a subtle thumbs up from his position near the altar. "And Sarah Johnson, do you take Marcus Thompson to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Sarah couldn't stop the tears flowing down her cheeks. "I do," she said. "1,000 times I do." "Then by the power vested in me," the minister continued, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." This was the moment Marcus had been preparing for. He glanced quickly at Dr. Rodriguez, who nodded. Then, to everyone's amazement, Marcus took a small step forward. The garden fell completely silent. Sarah's mother grabbed her husband's hand so tight her knuckles turned white. Katie had her phone ready, recording every second. Marcus didn't just stand there. He took another step toward Sarah. The special braces under his tuxedo made a soft whirring sound, nearly hidden by the gentle garden breeze. Each movement was calculated, practiced, perfected over months of secret therapy sessions. "Marcus," Sarah whispered, her hands covering her mouth in shock, "you're walking." "For you," he said softly, taking one more step until he was directly in front of her. "All for you." Then, in a moment that would be talked about for years to come, Marcus reached out, pulled Sarah close, and kissed her. Not as a man in a wheelchair, not as someone who needed to be reached down to, but as a husband standing proud beside his wife. The garden erupted in applause and cheers. Sarah's father was sobbing openly now, and her mother had mascara running down her face. Even the wedding coordinator was crying, her clipboard clutched to her chest. When they finally broke apart, Marcus whispered in Sarah's ear, "Races are experimental. I can only stand and walk for short periods right now. But with more therapy, who knows? This is just the beginning." Sarah touched his face gently. "You did all this for me?" "No," Marcus replied, his eyes shining. "I did it for us. To show everyone that love doesn't just heal our hearts. Sometimes it helps heal our bodies too." As they turned to face their guests as husband and wife, Marcus took Sarah's hand, and, together, they took 3 steps down from the altar. Each step was met with more applause, more tears, more proof that miracles really do happen. Dr. Rodriguez quickly brought the wheelchair forward. Marcus had reached his standing limit for now, but as he sat down, his smile never dimmed. He had done what everyone said was impossible. He had stood beside his bride, walked to her, and kissed her as an equal. Sarah's brother James was the first to reach them. "Man," he said to Marcus, wiping his eyes, "you just raised the bar impossibly high for every other groom in history." Katie hugged them both. "Worth keeping the secret?" she asked Sarah. "Worth every mysterious appointment, every dodged question, every suspicious moment," Sarah replied, still in awe. As they prepared to head to the reception, Marcus looked up at his new wife. "You know what the best part is?" he asked. "What's that?" "This is just our first miracle," he said. "We have a lifetime of them ahead of us." Sarah leaned down and kissed him again, not caring that her makeup was ruined or that everyone was watching. In that moment, she understood that true love wasn't about standing or sitting, walking or rolling. It was about two hearts beating as one, about believing in the impossible, and about never letting anything stand in the way of dreams. Would you like me to continue with the final part 8? The reception was held in a beautifully decorated hall adjacent to the garden. As Marcus and Sarah made their entrance, he surprised everyone again by engaging the leg braces for their first dance, something he had practiced for months in secret. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ announced, please welcome Mr. and Mrs. Thompson for their first dance. The familiar notes of Perfect by Ed Sheeran filled the room. Marcus stood from his wheelchair once more, taking Sarah's hand. They had practiced this moment countless times at the medical facility, but no one except Dr. Rodriguez and the therapy team knew about it. Just like we practiced, Marcus whispered as they began to sway together. The braces hummed softly beneath his tuxedo pants, supporting his every move. Phones lit up around the room as guests recorded this miraculous moment. Sarah's mother cried into her husband's shoulder, watching her daughter dance with the man everyone had doubted. The same people who had once whispered about their relationship now stood in awe of their love. After the dance, Marcus returned to his wheelchair, exhausted but happy. Dr. Rodriguez approached the newlyweds, holding a champagne glass. I've been doing this for 20 years, he said, but I've never had a patient work as hard as Marcus. 3 hours of therapy every day for 6 months, all to create this moment. Sarah turned to her husband. Is that where you were all those times? Marcus nodded. The technology is still experimental. Insurance wouldn't cover it, so I sold my beach house in California to pay for the braces and therapy. Worth every penny to see your face today. During dinner, Marcus's sister Katie clinked her glass for a toast. When my brother had his accident, she began, he told me he would never find someone who could love him completely. Sarah proved him wrong. She loved him not despite his wheelchair, but as a complete person, and today, he proved that love can make miracles happen. Later in the evening, Sarah's father surprised them by wheeling in a large screen. A video began playing, a compilation of Marcus's therapy sessions, showing his journey from first trying the braces to practicing their wedding dance. There wasn't a dry eye in the room as they watched his countless falls, his determination, and finally his success. Why did you keep this all secret? Sarah asked him softly. Because you loved me exactly as I was, Marcus replied. I wanted to show everyone else that their doubts about us were wrong. That nothing is impossible when two people love each other enough. As the reception wound down, Dr. Rodriguez pulled them aside for one last conversation. The technology is advancing rapidly, he explained. With continued therapy, Marcus might be able to use the braces for longer periods. We're already seeing improvements beyond what we expected. Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand. Whatever happens, we're in this together. Just before they left for their honeymoon, Sarah's brother James approached them. Remember when I asked if you couldn't find an able-bodied man to date? He said to Sarah. I was wrong. You found the strongest man I've ever met. Marcus and Sarah's story spread throughout the hospital where they first met. The video of their first dance went viral on social media, inspiring other couples facing similar challenges. Messages poured in from around the world, thanking them for showing that love knows no limitations. As they drove away from the reception, Sarah looked at her new husband. So, any other secrets I should know about? Marcus grinned. Just one. I've been accepted into an advanced therapy program. In a year, I might be able to walk short distances without the wheelchair. But even if that doesn't happen, I already have everything I need right here. Sarah leaned over and kissed him. You know what? When I first met you, people said I was crazy to fall in love with a man in a wheelchair. Now they're calling us a miracle, but they're all missing the point. What's that? Marcus asked. The real miracle wasn't you standing up today. It was two people believing in love more than they believed in limitations. That's the biggest miracle of all. As they drove toward their future together, they knew their story would continue to inspire others. But for Marcus and Sarah, the greatest inspiration was the love they shared, a love that proved that sometimes the biggest miracles come not from standing up, but from standing together. The end. Would you like me to help you with anything else about the story?